All right, so theory of mind, hypnotherapy, hypnosis, theory of mind. What is mind? How does it build? Where does it come from? Oops, I have interns. What I'm going to share with you comes from many different sources, and my understanding is just based on my own direct experience of myself. I discovered hypnosis without knowing what it was. And I've used it on myself and shown little tricks and things that I figured out all by myself to other people without really knowing what I was doing, without really calling it anything. It was just, hey, you can do this, you can do that. Why don't you try it, right? I can do this, can you do that? And later, I was sharing with someone some things that I'd figured out. Somebody was asking me, and they said, that sounds a lot like hypnotherapy. That sounds a lot like NLP. You should study that. There's courses. You can go and get certified. So I looked up a school and found an accredited school, highly accredited school in Los Angeles called HMI, and I went to go study what hypnotherapy was. And I was taught theory of mind, and it sort of made sense with what, according to what hypnosis is. And it made sense. And then we were taught how to go through hypnotic induction. And as soon as I went through, I knew exactly what the space was. I recognized that I'd been in and out of that space many times. I'd never known what to call it. And then when I learned all of the different elements of NLP, 80% of it I'd already just kind of figured out myself, right? So anyone who pays attention to themselves can figure these things out. Hypnotherapy, modern hypnotherapy, hypnosis has been known for thousands of years. Modern hypnotherapy, one of the real fathers, the sources of modern hypnotherapy is a man named Milton Erickson. The story that that I have heard is that he was 8 years old in an iron lung machine. Told he had polio. He had polio, and he was in an iron lung machine. And at the age of somewhere between 8 and 10, being told by doctors that he was not going to live or walk ever again. And my understanding, and I have not looked up his autobiography. This is what I learned, but it makes sense to me. Is that he, as an 8-year-old, in that iron lung machine, decided that no, he was not going to die, and he was going to work his way out of that. And the way he was going to do that was by remembering how he used to move, and remembering how he used to, and basically just put his mind into it and start bringing himself back to life. And he walked out of the iron lung machine and founded modern hypnotherapy. NLP was the field of NLP, the science of NLP was created by two therapists, psychotherapists. I'm not sure exactly what their background is, Brindler and Bandler. And they thought, everybody studies sick people, damaged people, deranged people. Why don't we go around and find people who are really good at doing stuff? And why don't we go and study them and see what do they do and how do they do it? And if we spend time with them, we might be able to figure out what's the process, like what's happening in their minds. Why are they excelling in something, and why is somebody else not excelling in something? And what they discovered is that, if you have a script or a sequence or an app for doing something that you're good at, and you can elicit what that script is, what that behavior, what that approach is, and you can recognize the pattern of what it is, and you can reproduce it and apply it to anything else. So they went around modeling, sampling, testing, and studying, staying at people's houses, and studying how they do things, how they eat breakfast, how they brush their teeth, how they approach life, how they approach challenges. And they found that some people have more creative ways of doing that. Right? Well, I did the same thing. I did it for myself and I did it for others. So about 80% of what I discovered of what I learned at my NLP courses and hypnotherapy courses, I'd already figured out by myself because we already do this. It's how we function. So, as far as I'm concerned, everyone should know how to brush their teeth and floss and trim their toenails and wash their hair and take care of a cut and know what hypnosis is and NLP and learn how to mental floss and right and wash their brains because they collect nonsense. And these are ways of identifying how we collect things and then how to clear them up, how to clean them up. Right? Does that make sense? So I'm going to share with you some information, which is just a map. It's not the territory, but it's just to illustrate, give you a sense of how things work. And you have to figure out for yourself what works or what doesn't. And I'm going to give you the least amount of information because I don't want to fill your head up with content. I just want to give you a chance to know that if you look into your head and you look at the content, that whatever you have, you can organize it and sort it out. Right? So the basic theory of mind is that we are born with a blank slate. There's nothing there. Except for a primitive mind or a reptilian mind that has fight and flight already programmed into it. Fight is not there for the first 6 months of our lives. Flight is, like the little baby turtles. But eventually we get big enough that fight starts to kick in. The other thing that's significant to understand is that we are born with 0 fears. We do have something known as a startle instinct. And the startle instinct, it's a good thing to have. You can sneak up on a baby and scare it and start crying. Right? Startle. I don't even know if that's how you spell start. Right? But 0 fears. And what that means is that all of your fears are learned. Now, if you're born in the jungles of Southeast Asia, being afraid of a cobra is a really good thing to learn. And to imprint so much that you can sense one and smell one from 10 meters away. Right? I was not born there, so I have no sense of that. I could probably sit on a cobra and it would bite me before I had a clue that it was a cobra. And then I'd have to figure out what to do about it. Right? That's actually happened here. I was closer to it. I had no clue that there was a snake just sitting there waiting. Right? Does that make sense? If you are born in the Arctic tundra, well, then you're going to have a sensitivity towards the 17 or 18 different types of snow. But if you're not, then snow is snow, and it's, what, wet, powdered, flaky, fluffy. I'm done with snow. How many options there are for snow, right? And if you live here in Southeast Asia, hypothermia is not something that you generally ever experience, suffer, or in danger of. But if you were born in a cold place, hypothermia is something you should know to be afraid of. Right? You start to get numb because it's cold, and you start to feel warm even though it's below freezing. You got to get yourself into shelter and not just drift to sleep. You should be afraid of falling asleep because you're feeling warm. It's so cold you're starting to feel warm. Now it's sleepy time. You don't want to do that. You should be afraid of that. If we live in a cold place, I know that. Johnson doesn't know that. She knows how to be afraid of snakes. I don't know how to be afraid of snakes. Does that make sense? So all of our fears are learned. What that also means is that we have the capacity, if we want to look through, reevaluate all of our fears and determine if they are holistic and ecological for our well-being. For example, I have gone through and checked my fears, and I have discovered that I have a good, strong, healthy fear of sitting in a car where somebody else is driving, and they're driving like a maniac, or they're drunk, or they're out of control, or they're falling asleep at the wheel. I have a very healthy fear response mechanism that makes my body get a little bit nervous, a little bit tense, and look at the person and very sternly say, slow down, pull over, or I'm going to kick your ass. And if we have an accident, you better hope I'm dead, otherwise I'm going to crawl over and destroy you. You stop driving. You're putting my life at risk. And I will do nothing to turn that fear off. Why would I? But I have had other fears that I have allowed myself to explore deeply and chosen to extract them, to replace them, because they were not helping me. Right? So you have to decide, you can decide what fears are good for you and what fears are not good for you. I had a powerfully intense fear of not having any money, especially if I'm in a foreign country. And that would cause me to wake up in the middle of the night in terror, even though I had plenty of money for that, but it was triggering a certain number in my head. And I chose to sit through and allow that to happen and get so low that I actually intentionally threw away all the last minute money that I had just to see what would happen. And I became the wealthiest person because I lost all my fears and I'm not motivated by fearing. So you have a capacity to find out what those fears are. How do they grow? How do they build? What is mind? The next thing to consider about how the mind accumulates things is that in the field of hypnotherapy and NLP and theory of mind, there's two laws, and one is called the law of identification, and the other one is called the law of association. What that means is that when we see something, our mind will try to identify it, and as soon as it can identify it, it'll try to associate it to anything else that it knows. And we'll start to create a matrix, a structure, a scaffolding of things that it identifies, of mind identifies, of what you can identify and what you can associate. So you have a positive experience. Positive means that it's healthy, empowering, strengthens you, it helps you become a healthier, stronger, better person. For example, you're a child, you're a little baby, and your parents buy you a puppy. And the puppy's so cute and sweet, and it jumps on you, and it licks you, and it tickles you, and you play with it, and you pull on it, and you just play with the thing, and you create this positive association, positive known for a puppy. And if this continues, and you meet other people that have puppies, and they love their puppies too, and you make friends with other people's puppies, and your dog goes out. You start stacking these knowns. The dogs are positive things for you. They're man's best friend, right? And you become a dog lover. And this, every time you see a dog, and every time you watch a Lassie movie, it just adds to your identification and association, and the known of what goodness comes from puppies and dogs. And right, does that make sense? Straightforward, right? Very simple. The same child that has got used to playing with a puppy encounters an adult cat. And the adult cat is the same size, it's just as furry, it's just as cute, or maybe even cuter, and the child grabs it the same way it would grab the puppy. Pulls it, and the adult cat scratches, and scares that child. And it creates and it's dangerous to the child, and it creates a negative no, as in this is bad, dangerous, scary. And depending on how the mother responds, if she screams or whatever's going on, there is a chance that this child will not only hate cats, but this child may have allergies to cats. And have itchy eyes, and cry, and sneeze, and not want to be anywhere near a cat. And every time it encounters somebody that doesn't like cats, the information that will come in is, dogs, good. gets bad. Right? Does that make sense? And somebody else will have an inverted experience. They have a great experience with a cat. They're playful. One day they approach a dog and it bites them, and then suddenly it doesn't make any sense. Right? So we accumulate pluses and minuses, and they get just. And depending on the quality of our life and our environment, depending on where our seed lands, right, we have more pluses or more minuses that accumulate in our unconscious. And all this is happening unconsciously because we're not aware that it's happening. It's just happening. It happened to you. And you did not pay any attention to the first 4 years, or 5 years, or 6 years, 7 years. And if nobody brought it up, maybe you never even thought about how you learn and how you think and how you've been accumulating what you know. Right? So potentially it could be the first time you're hearing. So everything's accumulating and building, and every time there you meet, okay, dogs, and then somebody loves huskies, and somebody likes wolves, and right, and you start creating these networks of pluses with minuses, and these start creating the scaffolding of the structure of your mind, where you're identifying different knowns that are plus to you or negative to you, minus to you, and you start associating them to each other, and it starts creating this network. This solid web where every time you see a dog, unconsciously you're remembering every experience you've ever had with a dog. It's being lit up. If they're all positive experiences, then you have a net positive, you love dogs. And if they're all mostly negative experiences and you hang out with people that have negative experiences, you're going to have a net, I hate dogs. Okay. Does that make sense? Life, love, money, sex, friends, brothers, sisters, parents, mom, dad, work, nationalities, musical tendencies, religions, sexual, gender identifications, everything that you are learning is stacking itself and multiplying and growing and connecting and establishing. All of this happens until you reach puberty. Sure enough, when you reach puberty, what in the field is known as the critical filter starts to separate the knowns from the conscious from the unconscious mind. You become much more self-aware, self-conscious, and you start choosing for yourself. And as a teenager, you start rebelling against your parents. Right? And you start doing things the way you think you're supposed to be doing them. But the roots of your mind is this, the first 10, 12, 13, 14 years of your life. You've accumulated the core of your unconscious. Right? So somewhere around, and it starts building probably around age 8 through 12 or 14, right? You begin deciding for yourself. Nampu is at a place where she's starting to decide for herself which way she wants to go. She already decides how she wants to dress. She decides what she wants to eat. And she's already been taught that she has a choice. If she wants to be honest and direct and straight and clear and truthful, we're going to reward that. And if she wants to lie and cheat and be cunning and manipulative, we're not going to reward that. We're actually going to tell her that maybe she should go live with people that want to do that. And she goes, no, I don't want to do that. Okay, because you can if you want to. If you can, you just go back and live with your grandparents, live with your mother. Like they live this way. You know that's how they treat each other. They're going to lie. They're going to cheat. They're going to steal. They're going to be violent. If you want that, you can have that. If this is what you want, sweetie, we'll send you there and we'll send them money to help them support you, and you can be this way. It's just 6.5. You can already tell the difference between, no, I actually like it better here with you. You sure? Because whatever you like better, we're going to, no, I want to do it. Oh, well, this is how we do things. Right? So she's already telling the difference. Her critical filters are already starting to build. Yeah? And it's calculated that about 88% of the content of your mind is unconscious knowns, positive knowns and negative knowns that you have unconsciously identified and unconsciously associated. Interesting. Which leaves about 12% of your conscious mind. So this is the conscious, what we call conscious mind. And this is what in the field is known as the unconscious mind. So as the conscious mind develops, you start to develop things like what we call free will. We begin to choose, we begin to identify ourselves, we start to see ourselves as adults. I'm not a kid anymore, I'm an adult. I'm a big one. Not as big, but I'm an adult. I'm going to choose. I want my driver's license, I'm going to decide how much I'm going to drink, I'm going to decide to have sex or not, I'm going to choose my boyfriend or my girlfriend, I'm going to choose what I want to wear. Right? These are the things that start to come up. Now, once this critical filter has been set in, it's important to know that it's calculated, and I mentioned this number before, that we humans are processing anywhere from 2 to 3 billion bits per second of information. And that information is coming from, part of it is coming from the inside, part of it is coming from the outside. The outside information is everything that's coming through you when you are eyes open, walking around, watching a movie, checking Facebook, walking into a 7-Eleven, ordering a Happy Meal, wherever you feel happiest to eat a meal. Right? Choosing who you're going to hang out with. And every time you meet a dog lover, they're reinforcing that, and that information is allowed past your critical filter, right? Because you're a dog lover and I'm a dog lover and we're all dog lovers, so let's go love some dogs. And then somebody shows up and says, I hate cats, I love dogs, and that information bounces out. Because in the architecture, the structural matrix of your mind, you don't have room for cat lovers. You have room for cat haters because you're a cat hater. I'm a cat hater. I'm a Democrat. I'm a Republican. I'm a supporter of this or that. I'm a liberal. I'm a conservative. I'm a whatever it is that people are. And of course, this includes all the association and the contexts and all the things that get imprinted that you get yourself throughout your lifetime and from your parents and from your grandparents and all sorts of things. So if my grandfather didn't eat chicken, I don't eat chicken. I remember going to visit some relatives that were family of my great-grandfather in Spain, and meeting them for the first time, and the patriarch of the family says to me, your great-grandfather Corpus, he was a great man for being a Republican. And I'm thinking, Spanish Republicans, Franco, this is 50 years ago, what is this man talking about? And I look at his furniture, and it's like ancient. And I look at how he's dressed, and I'm like, this man's lost in the last century. The first thing he says to me is, yes, but your great-grandfather was a socialist or a capitalist, or... I was like, okay. And it bounced in and out of my critical filters because I'm not a Democrat or a Republican or a Franquista or a Spanish Republican. I couldn't care less. That has nothing to do with me. Right? There was no context, so I watched that thought go back out, but I never forgot it. So whatever is in alignment with your filters will go through. Whatever is out of alignment, so just bounce it out. You won't hear it. You just won't. No interest. You'll be blind to it. Tomorrow you go out and you buy a new electric car, and suddenly every other car on the street is also an electric car, and it's the same model you have, and you haven't noticed it. Until now that you own one, and now you're proud, and in fact, so now it's become a positive known in you. So that's the basic setup. Now, it's known that when you are, poorly oxygenated, dehydrated, low blood sugar spike, overwhelmed with information, that your critical filter becomes porous, and that material can come in. You can be hypnotized. You can be suggested into loving cats, if you hate cats. If you have a negative, it can be turned into a positive. Or positives can be turned into negatives. Yeah? And this is known and has been known by people for a long time, and they're actively creating television shows, commercials, ads to do this to you. And That's part of the pollution in the air. That's what you're breathing in. That's what you're absorbing. That's what you're eating. The mental food for thought is coming in that way. So that being the case, what if you chose to go in and look and see what are your positives and your strengths and see if what they are, and what are your negatives, and then you chose to then weaken your critical filter and go in and start rewriting and changing those minuses to a plus. And eliminating your fears and your insecurities and your allergies and your asthmas and your blah, 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 blah. One by one. Right? Does that make sense? So that when the critical filter reassembles itself, you have now changed the architecture of your unconscious mind, but you put a little conscious thought into it, so you are less unconscious and more subconscious. Right? This is what we're doing with our dream therapy, and this is what you are doing with your mental currency account script rewriting program. We're looking in and we're going, wow, we're nervous with 20,000 baht. Great, we're going to start walking around with 20,000 baht. 25,000 baht. We're going to keep 100,000 baht, right? Now, we're not going to walk around dark alleys, just showing our stuff because we might get mugged. But if you're afraid of something, you might want to consider the fact as to whether, is this fear helping you? Is it helping you live longer? I'm afraid that if I have an infection that I catch on this beach in a foot and it starts to grow, I have a very clear and authentic fear that it could be flesh-eating bacteria. I have personally diagnosed 4 people that have gone to hospitals and they've been told if you did not come into this hospital, you would lose your foot or your leg or your life in 24 hours. So if your little cut isn't getting better and it starts to get red and it starts to grow, please be very afraid for your life and go get some medical attention as soon as possible. Because to me, that's a very natural, healthy.
How does this look?
Yeah, I don't know. How does it look? How does it look compared to yesterday? If it's redder than yesterday, it looks terrible. If it's less redder than yesterday, it looks great.
It's redder than yesterday.
It's redder than yesterday. Okay, so you're going to have to clean it. It's got a little bit of pus. So you're going to want to clean it properly, and then consider maybe if it's worse tomorrow, or if you start getting streaks, you're going to want to go to the clinic tomorrow or the next day. Streaks. Red streaks that start to grow. There's like little stretches out. Yeah, that's characteristic of that kind of bacteria in this environment. Right. So
one over here is going down.
It's going down. Yeah. But no, like you have to track it, keep track of it. I've seen worse, but you just have to follow it and pay attention to it. Right. You might need some antibiotic ointment instead of just a little bit of the red stuff. You put a little antibiotic ointment and see how you feel. Right. Does that make sense? So. But this would be an example of a healthy fear that you're choosing to keep. Right? Does that make sense? So what you need to figure out is when are your critical filters more susceptible? I already give you a hint. You're not breathing properly, if you're dehydrated, if your blood sugar levels are consistently low or spiking and crashing. If you have just woken up in the last hour or you're getting ready to fall asleep, your critical filters are open, you're most susceptible. Late night TV, morning cartoons, those are the most expensive time slots for commercials because those are the ones that get in. This is known. If you don't know it, right? It's like it's known that if you take a worm and put a hook through it and drop it in the water, a fish will eat it. If the fish doesn't know that, the fish might get caught and pulled out. Right? So you are being, you have to be aware that there is a science and technology for marketing and sales that everybody uses. So how can you do it to yourself? You have to learn how to do this to yourself. So the first thing to know is that before you're going to bed and when you're first waking up is the best time to contemplate your fears, to meditate, to look into your thoughts. These windows of meditation are open for you. Your critical filters are open and relaxed, right? So you have a capacity to see what's within you. And then once you know what's within you, you have the skills now to write a dream therapy, a self-hypnotic script that will sandwich in how to clear, it's okay, it doesn't matter, how to clear yourself of things that are disempowering to you. Because they're disempowering to you. If they're empowering to you, then you can enforce them. Right? So, for example, with the mental currency account, what are we doing? Well, we are every day we're putting in, I'm worth this much. I'm worth this much. I just spent an hour. I invested an hour of my time. I'm worth this much. I'm worth this much. I'm worth more. I'm worth more. I'm putting a number on it. I'm attaching it to an activity, an action that I'm taking with awareness. I'm choosing to be more aware, more awake. I'm adding value to that. I'm investing in my experience so that I can be wealthier. Right? And it works. So you got to do it. How many times? I don't know. How many times have you told yourself you're poor? 1,000,000 times. Well, then you got to do it 1,000,000 times. First, stop telling yourself you're poor. So read Rich Dad Poor Dad and see what your poor thoughts are. So there's the natural points where your body will go into some form of overwhelm, either because it hasn't slept enough or hasn't eaten well enough or whatever the situation is. And then those critical filters will get loosened, and then you can you'll enter into what can be called a hypnagogic state, and you can learn to guide your awareness down through it. At first, it's useful to have somebody help you do that, so you go to a hypnotherapist and you tell them, I'd like to have the experience of being hypnotized, and I would like to lose my fears of money, or I would like to lose my fears of whatever. I would like to cease my smoking habit, or I would like to take away whatever unconscious compulsion I have that makes me overeat and gain weight. And it's a very useful approach. It's a very useful tool. So for some things, you might need help of a hypnotherapist and or an NLP practitioner to help you clear things. That said, the basic things you should be able to know yourself. And as you study yourself more, what you need to know is that mind is repetition. Mind is hypnosis. And what I'm interested in doing personally is, instead of hypnotizing people and changing their behaviors, and there's lots of people out there that do behavior modification, is I will start with that. I will say, well, if you have negative behaviors, you need to modify them. For example, if somebody comes here and they want to stay with us and do our program, and they're addicted to alcohol or tobacco, or they're grossly overweight, or doing anything that's negative to them, I will say to them, before you can do this program, you must resolve this somehow on your own with help from somebody else, but I will not help you do this. I only work with people who are already healthy, already have gotten to a point where the vast majority of their behaviors are positive and empowering. I'm not interested in working with people who are poisoning themselves, damaging themselves, breaking themselves, choosing to swim down when the purpose of this exercise is learning to float and sing. Well, I'm not going to work with you. But if you go over to the sanctuary next door, they've got healers, and they've got acupuncture and Ayurveda, and cacao ceremonies, and hypnotherapists, and NLP practitioners, and they can teach you mantras, and you can learn how to cease smoking, and you can start to get fit and gain weight. And once you've managed to do all of that, and you're healthy again, then come back, and let's see what we can do. Because we're climbing Mount Everest. We're not doing the Special Olympics. We're going to climb the most intense, most difficult challenge that we have. You have to be in shape. You're not going to accomplish this by poisoning yourself or crippling or sabotaging yourself. So whatever crippling or self-sabotaging behaviors you have, you need to sort this out first, right? And of course, we always have some sort of sabotaging behavior, I understand that, but if you're sensitive enough to not poison yourself on a regular basis, you have that level of intelligence and inner core and integrity, right? Then you can go into the deeper ones, or things like being afraid of money and this and that, right? So you're going to have to overcome your challenges about fears of investing. Otherwise, how are you going to grow in this territory? If you never manage to overcome that, then our conversation pretty much ends today, because I don't have anything else to talk to you about, because I'm here for people who want to thrive. I'm here for people who want to say, I'm going to go out and make millions. If I can make billions, I'm going to make billions, because I can help open up centers and alternative energy and organic food. I can do that. So I'm with you the whole way if that's what you want to do. We're at zero, we start at zero. If we got millions, well then it costs $1 million to start this program. So that's where you're at already, right? Let's start wherever you are, right? Does that make sense? Is that fair? Right? So you can overcome the vast majority, if not all of them, and then you can always find someone that can help you deal with something somewhere. And remember, before we had a conversation, you said you didn't know what to do next. I said, well, why don't you see if you can find a good hypnotherapy or NLP school in your area, so you can start taking some courses, because you're going to use these skills. It's like first aid. If you can figure out first aid, you can take care of your foot before you have to go to the clinic and rely on a doctor. But should you fall and break something, then of course you should go to the doctor. A Band-Aid ain't going to take care of a broken foot. Then you go to the doctor, and then they do what they have to do, right? Well, what can you handle on your own? Right? That's the first question. All right, so with that, here comes the next bit of information. The next bit of information is that you have a limited amount of information that you are able to hold at any given time. And that is the vessel of your mind, and or the RAM of your computer, right? And the amount that you may hold might change over time, or from day to day. You might be able to handle more and more information. But let's say that you were able to start Monday morning perfectly clear, resolved, up to date with everything in your life. And your cup is absolutely, completely empty and clean. Your alarm would go off, and you'd see the time, and that bit of information would start to fill in. Right? And then you decide whether you're going to have the Fruit Loops or the Cocoa Puffs or the muesli or the granola or the yogurt or the eggs for breakfast, and then you hear the news, and you drive through traffic, and you get to work, right? And at some point, your cup is going to get filled. And as soon as your cup is full and you can't handle any more information, the first thing your body's going to do is yawn. Your cup is full. You've just reached the max amount of information that you can handle in that moment. And when that happens, you need to empty out that cup. Otherwise, if I keep pouring more water into the cup, everything else will spill out. Something else will spill out, or the water I put in will spill in and out, and it's not going to function properly, right? Does that make sense? Yeah. So, let's say that you have a full day, and then you go home, you relax, you do your yoga, you meditate, you clear yourself as much as you can, or whatever feels right, but you don't clear all of it out. And you wake up the next day, and there's a residue because you didn't pay your taxes, or you don't have time to do this, or you fought with your boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, right? And you start off, and you already have a certain amount. Then you add in your day. At some point, you get overwhelmed. And then the next day, you still haven't resolved the fight with your significant other, and then your mom called, and then one thing led to another, and you got into a fight with your mom, and then it just keeps adding, and suddenly you get to a point where you wake up and you've already used 80%, 90% of your capacity. You're already at 90% full. You wake up and you're full. You don't know it because you're used to it, because you've done it your whole life, because everybody does it. Because the question is very, very simple. Just be really honest with yourself. Are you completely clear, up to date with everything in your life? Did you wake up this morning completely clear, up to date with everything in your life?
No. Could be better.
What's that?
Could be better.
Could be better. Well, it could be complete. Is it complete? No, right. So you have anywhere from 1% to 99%.
And if your cup is full, then it's also actually burned out.
And then you start to burn out. Yeah, if you're always full, and you're like, it's hard to handle, and I can't do this, and now I'm getting a migraine, and then now I'm doing this, and then this happened, and now and then my boyfriend said this, and my girlfriend said that. Right? So you begin to, you get overwhelmed, you begin to overflow. Right? Now, if you breathe properly, if you maintain hydration levels, and if you monitor the intake of information, then you won't go into hypnosis so often. But if we go back to this theory of mind thing, if you realize that 88% of the content of your unconscious mind is unconscious, unknown knowns, and many of them are in contradiction and intention with each other, it means that you're already using 88% of your disk is already full of information that may or may not be useful to you. On top of that, of the remaining 10 or 12%, that's because it's 88 to 90%, of the 10, 12% that's left, it's available to you full 10%, 12% only when you're breathing properly and hydrating properly and not entering a hypnotic state and not having blood sugar malfunctions, and not dealing with boyfriends and girlfriends, and not having more a month at the end of your paycheck.
99% of the time unconscious.
Right. So of the remaining 10%, 99.999, if not 100, if not 200% of the population, is already, what's been measured is that people are, of the remaining 10 to 12%, they are at best conscious 20% of that time, at best. And these were studies that were done 10, oh thank you, perfect, you're getting coconuts. And this is what was measured 10, 20 years ago, when people did not talk about things like overwhelm. Today, it'll come, you'll get it. Today, people are functioning at anywhere from 0.1 to 1% of their capacity.
Yeah, I totally believe that.
Now, when I tell people that they're functioning at 0.1 to 1% of their capacity, I get two kinds of responses. One of them is, me, I'm not functioning at 1%, I'm functioning at 99%. And I say, okay, great, good luck. Nice to meet you. And then other people go, 1%? I'm only at 1%? Oh my God, what am I doing with the other 99%? What if I function at 100%? What would my life be like? It'd be like, well, it'd be 10,000 times better. Yeah. It would be 10,000 times better if you could go from 1% to 100%. Right? So, how you approach this is going to determine the rest of your journey. Because if you find out that you're making whatever, 1,000 a week, 1,000 a month, 10K, 100K a year, whatever it is. But what you don't realize is that that's after taxes, and that the government is charging you 99%. You're in the 99% tax bracket. Right? What if you could clear that up? What if you could find a good accountant that would help you clear all that up? Wouldn't that be nice? When it comes to getting a sense of what the load is on your nervous system, what you're doing, imagine one day discovering that your beautiful home that you're living on, you're actually just living on the porch. And there's a door right behind you. And you haven't looked at it because there was just like a tarp there or something. And you look behind the tarp, you look behind the curtains, and there's a door, and you open it up, and there's a foyer and a living room. There's all sorts of rooms in there. So you move into that space, and now you've done some personal development. You've worked on yourself. You've got more room. You're healthier. You're stronger. You make your move. You take massive action. You can sort of go start chasing after money, and you're now using, instead of 0.1% of your resources, you're going to have 1% of your resources. But it's 10 times bigger, so it feels so much better. So you don't bother to keep looking. But then you keep exploring, and you realize that there's other doorways, and that there's stairways, and there's elevators. And there are dozens of rooms on dozens of floors in your house, in your mansion. And that those rooms have lights that are on, windows that are open, air conditioning units that are running, bathrooms with toilets that are leaking and faucets that are dripping. And you suddenly realize that you pay this huge electric and utility bill every single month. There's such a drain on your energy and on your resources and you've gotten used to it. So you're okay, because with 1%, you're still a millionaire at 1%.
Yeah.
If you have access to 1% of your resources, you can be a millionaire. You can design a space shuttle. You can build a computer. 1% full focus on your conscious capacity to make something, and you can become a millionaire or a billionaire. All these amazing people are functioning. Instead of at 0.1%, they got themselves to 1%. They have peaks of 10%, but they push themselves so much. They only sleep 2, 4, 5 hours a day. They don't eat, or they only eat certain things, and they push. And they put themselves into hypnotic trances that allow them to keep going, no different than a marching military, marching army. And they just keep going and keep pushing and keep pushing and keep pushing and keep pushing. And with that 1%, it's enough to go that far. Well, what if you were to go through and start turning off the lights and closing the windows and readjusting the thermostats and fixing the leaky faucets and all of that kind of stuff? And suddenly you realize that you've got this mansion full of beautiful rooms, and your energy bills drop by 90%, by 99%. You've got bandwidth. You've closed all the extra apps. You've shut down all these unnecessary associations of ideas and thoughts and knowns that you picked up from childhood, from people who unconsciously picked up from childhood, from people who unconsciously picked up from childhood for the past 10,000 years. And 99% of it is just junk. It's crap. It's useless. You're dragging anchors and dead weights. You're running your AC in the winter with windows open. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, there's no... And it's all happening unconsciously. But you do have to open the door, and there might be a scary monster behind the door. There might be a fear. There might be an insecurity. There might be a trauma. That strange, distorted, perverted uncle or auntie or grandparent might be the memory of them might be hiding behind that little door, right? So you don't go in there. You start going in and checking what your the content is, and you start eliminating it. And slowly, you start clearing out content from this overfilled cup. And before you know it, you can live a life where your cup is always empty, and you choose to fill it with whatever you want to fill it. In this case, I'm going to fill it with nice, delicious coconut.
Yeah.
Right? Or a project of how to create an aquaponic system, or a better way of channeling resources, or of sharing what I have to share, or whatever I'm doing. Right? Does that make sense? So we're going to go through this exercise after we finish our coconut, so that you can see how you can put yourself in and out of a trance. And as soon as you can see how you put yourself in and out of a trance, you need to now become aware of the fact that anything and everything around you will try to put you into a trance to their advantage. Every time you walk into a convenience store or a mall or a 7-Eleven or any place like that, the way that things are arranged, the colors that they use, the size of the letters, the 9.95 instead of 10, the way the numbers are all there to help guide you into being a better consumer. Triggering your fears and your desires, which all go back to the fears that you learned, because you had no fears when you were born, you had no desires when you were born either, but all of these were implanted into what's good for you, what you want, right? So that you will go out and put a cigarette in your mouth and poison yourself out of the desire to be strong and independent, and you're poisoning yourself to make yourself strong. And if you manage to quit smoking, you'll start drinking or overeating. If you manage to get rid of all of those, you'll start driving too fast and crash yourself. Because the inner contradiction, the inner tension is going to always be there until you go in and remove it. So how do you go in and remove it? That's what we're going to do next. We're going to learn how to hypnotize ourselves, put ourselves in and out of a trance, so that we can work on it. And we can do it here, we can do it at home, we can do it on the dance floor, we can use music, you can do anything you want. The secret is to find ways to overwhelm yourself. Intentionally put yourself into an overwhelm. There's sorts of stories and ideas and things about hypnosis that you need to determine for yourself whether they're right or wrong. But there's this idea that a strong mind will not be hypnotized, and that you must always stay in control. And there are people who have this kind of belief ingrained into them. So they make it very difficult to hypnotize themselves. And then when they go to hypnotherapists have to find ways to trick them into getting them to hypnotize themselves. And they're just a pain in the ass to work with. Because if you create that strong of a shell around you, consciously, then you don't allow the good medicine to come in. And you still get hypnotized. You still fall into hypnotic trance all the time. You just, the fear that somebody else might try to control your mind, right, will interfere with the entire process. So you are at liberty to enter or not this space. You can decide in the moment whether or not what I'm saying to you is of interest to you or not. It makes no difference to me. At some point, if you manage to learn how to do this for yourself, you can do a lot of work on yourself all by yourself. And you're here and you've got time and what else to do, right? So it can be pretty straightforward and pretty simple, right? Does that make sense? Right? So I'll show you how it's done. Nampu, can you come here for a second? Come here, sweetie. Can you sit here for a second? We're going to make a movie. We're going to move this. So, ready? Ready? No. Look into my eyes. Your eyelids are going to get sleep. You can try to resist all you want, but your eyelids are going to get sleep. Each time you blink, they're going to get heavy. I'm not going to put you to sleep because it's not that I want to tickle you and eat you. No, I'm not. But your eyelids are going to sleep, and then you're going to slowly fall asleep. That's how you do it, sweetie. The cracks are up. I'm playing this game with her for a long time. I pretend to try to hypnotize her and knock myself out. She thinks it's the funniest thing. It was pretty funny. And she already knows I'm going to do it. That's why she bursts out laughing. But this is what I'm going to say to you. Your eyes are going to get sleepy. Right? And all you have to do is allow yourself to go with it. So the easiest way to do it is just do it to yourself. And what I want you to do is I want you to sit comfortably. Now, usually you would sit if you were doing hypnosis to a client, you would sit them on a comfortable chair, right? And they would not cross their legs or cross their arms. And that all works. That's all like clinical hypnotherapy. People come in, they're nervous, they're stressed, they're tight, they have all sorts of issues and things. And there's ways of preparing people so that it will happen more easily. But I'm not going to do anything like that. Okay? I'm just going to go to the more simple, advanced, straightforward. I'm going to show you the protocol. You're going to go home and figure this out yourself. I'm not here to hypnotize you. I'm just here to show you how to relax yourself and drop consciously into your unconscious mind. Okay? So the way that I learned to do it, there are a couple of ways that you can do it. They're called hypnotic inductions. And I'm going to show you how to do it. And it was interesting that when I first learned this, this was the highest technology in how to do it. And then slowly later, people found quicker and faster and rapid inductions and better ways of doing it. And there's hypnotherapists that are just masters at finding quicker and quicker and quicker ways of getting people into hypnotic trances. And I learned how to do all of this. And then one day my awareness awakened from needing to be always in my mind and came out of the mind just into the body and just centered in being. And I looked back on it and I instantly knew what the situation was. Mind is hypnosis, and if your mind is on, you're in a state of hypnosis. Period. And the entire awakening process is about dehypnotizing yourself. So I'm not a hypnotherapist, I am a dehypnotherapist. And I'm not a neurolinguistic programmer, I'm a neurolinguistic deprogrammer. And all sorts of people will go out there and try to hypnotize you and try to program you and teach you how to program you in a better way. And I will say, yes, you must first hypnotize yourself or be hypnotized so that you are tighten that lid and break it locked. But then you got to learn how to unhypnotize yourself, right? And we're going to NLP you to get you out of feeling in a funk, and we're going to get you standing up and jumping up and down and making your move, and that's all great. But at some point, you need to be able to effortlessly, doing nothing, just be present. Feeling energized, empowered, and ready to take the world on, right? Play with your little girl, whatever comes next, right? Does that make sense? So I'm going to show you the basics so that you can feel when it's going in that direction, and you learn how to unfeel, how to feel your way back out. Because you really want to work your way out of your mind. Sometimes you got to go into it a little bit to realize, right? So you're stuck in the mud, you're stuck in the snow, and what do? You rock the car. You bring it in a little bit, then you pull it back, and you pull it in, and you pull it out, and eventually you can pop out of that rut. Right? Does that make sense? So, the simplest hypnotic induction that you can do on yourself, there's a couple. The first one is that you can take your hand and you can place it in front of you, so there's a little bit of tension that's pulling in front of you, and your hand is in front of you and you're looking at your big finger here, right? Your fingers start with your fingers closed, right? Just hold it with one hand, the other hand just keep it on your lap, relaxed, and you're going to look at this point. And as you look at that point, I want you to notice and relax your hand, that your hand has a natural tendency for your fingers to slowly and gently start wiggling and twitching and going wider and wider apart. Slowly and gently, your fingers tend to open up wider and wider apart. And as you're breathing and you're hearing the sound of the ocean around you and your fingers are doing that, you may notice that your fingers or your hands are also slowly coming closer and closer to your face, kind of pointing towards it. The entire time, you're just keeping your focus, soft focus on that middle finger, and just noticing how pleasant and relaxing it is to let your fingers go wider and wider, further and further. With each breath, allowing your body to relax a little bit more. That's right. And should you notice any moisture in your mouth and you need to swallow, you can just swallow, and that's okay too, people do. And take a nice breath, that's right, relax. And you just allow yourself into that space. The body has its own natural way of moving, twitching, the hand comes closer and closer to your face. Your fingers are slowly and gradually moving back and forth, or slightly going wider and wider, further and further apart. That's right. And then I'd like you to take a nice deep breath and put your hand back down. And now take your other hand, put it in front of you in the same way, and then just relax and let the same thing happen all by itself.